If we don't make place for the child to be with themselves, then how is the child to know who they are? They must know who they are. How will they choose things in life otherwise? Yeah, you can choose for them now because they're children and your parents, but at some point they have to choose for themselves. So it's important that children know who they are. Reading is one space which allows you to do that. Children saw the worst of what happened in partition, the killings, if you were taking a train, how could you be protected from that? They were not protected from, like, there are accounts of the women who jumped into the wells, and people who were children at that time remember seeing all of that, right? So we know. And that's the other thing, to be able to remember that childhood is not always a protected site. That children are as much in the world as adults, and if the world around them is going up in flames, they are also going to experience that. To be able to just protect your child to the extent that you can't talk about difficult things that have occurred to other children, I think there's something there that is just perpetuating the inequality.
Hi guys, this is your host Raghav, and in this amazing episode of Discovery of an Author, we sit down with Samina. Now, Samina Mishra is a documentary filmmaker, a writer, and a teacher based out of New Delhi. And very interesting, she specializes in creating media and writing storybooks, seeing the world through the lens of a child. Her specialization lies in understanding the worldview or seeing the world from the perspective of a child and from children. And in this beautiful conversation, we discussed with Samina her latest book, Roop and the Rivercrossing. And Roop and the Rivercrossing was a very unique book for me specifically, because for the first time, I saw a book which was centered around an era of partition, India-Pakistan partition, but seen from the lens of a child, which was absolutely fascinating and something which I have never experienced before. And in this conversation, we really deep dive into her philosophy of why it is important for parents and adults alike to understand the viewpoint of a child. How does a child sees the world, and why we do not give them as much as credit as we should give them. We generally take kids for granted. We usually do not ask them. We usually do not consult with them. We do not care about their autonomy. But this, Samina is advocating for, that this is something that we should do. It was a very powerful episode in which you will understand that children's opinion matter, their autonomy matter, and how we can create a very great ecosystem between a child and an adult or a parent or whomsoever, the kind of relationship that could exist, and how we can actually empower not only the children, but also us as adults, and broaden our horizons to various viewpoints that exist. And also, Samina discussed about the importance of reading, specifically in today's time, that yes, we need to embrace technology, but we also need to inculcate some habit of reading and activity for children, which is really good for the overall development. So I really hope that you like this episode. This is a very unique topic. It is centered around the children, and I hope it really resonates. I think if we can provide a very strong foundation to our children, our future as a country could be very bright. Watch this episode, and again, if you are liking the kind of authors we are bringing and the kind of subjects we are having discussions on, I humbly request you to please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. This is the only way in which our podcast could grow, and we can continue to bring you such amazing authors and the subjects that we do. Thank you, and enjoy the podcast. So, Samina, welcome to Discovery of an Author podcast. It is truly an honor to have you on our podcast. And I'm really excited for our conversation today. So again, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
No. It is, I always tell, everyone before the start of the podcast that we only exist because of authors like you. If there were no authors and no storytelling, we would be nowhere, So our agenda, we really want people to not just read the books, but we really want people to also know the authors, know the people behind the books, right? We were talking about Satyajit Ray. So I told you, right, that I love that man. And when you love somebody, you want to consume everything that that person creates as a creator, right? So when he writes a book, I'm like, I'm going to purchase his book. When he creates a movie, I'm like, I'm going to watch his movie. So there's this connection between the creator and the audience, right? So that's what we want. That's why the name is Discovery of an Author, not Discovery of a book.
Well, more power to you. I mean, for children's book authors to get that kind of stature would be like, I don't think in my lifetime in India,
Yeah.
but more power to you.
Samina, before we start, I really want you to introduce yourself. Tell our viewers who you are, the kind of work you have done, are doing, will do, everything. We just want to know everything about you. Please
Yeah.
start.
So okay, I'm Samina Mishra. I do a few things. I mean I'm here because I'm a children's book author, and we're going to be talking about one of my books. But I'm also trained as a filmmaker, and that is also what I do. I started out my career by kind of assisting other filmmakers and then making my own films. So I still do make films, and I came into writing for kids. I mean, I always liked writing. I came into writing for children because I was exploring the idea of doing a film in Old Delhi, and I was not able to raise the money for that. And I happened to meet the publishers who went on to publish the book, and it sort of got turned into a book, and that was my very first book, Hina in the Old City, which was published by Tulika. And other than so, a lot of the writing that I do for children comes out of other work that I do. So, my filmmaking takes me to places and different kinds of children that I meet because I do documentary film. Very often, I'm working with children who come from very different backgrounds from my own. And I think of how it's important to have stories that come from, although I write in English and I write therefore for mostly middle class urban kids, I think it's really important that stories that are from children that are not from those backgrounds are also available. So a lot of my writing comes out of like something I might have encountered, something it makes me think about, or all of that. I also, one of the things, so this work that I do kind of took me into the classroom, and I'm a teacher as well. So I have taught film at different levels. I've taught at the MA level as well. And then for about 7 years, I taught in the IB film program. Um, and I also teach in a kind of like, non-formal kind of way where I work with children and the arts in different ways. So whether it's creative writing, whether it is, doing some kind of art project which involves image making, whether it's photography or collage or some things like that, using sound, working with children also in non-formal spaces to do film, video. So I do that kind of teaching as well, and I really enjoy that because it feels like I'm able to, like, there's a process which is interactive, and it's not that I'm teaching the kids, but we are kind of doing something together. We are creating something together, and
Collaboration.
yes, it's a collaborative process in which I hope that we are both like there's learning on all sides. So yeah, so that's what I do. I'm a filmmaker, I'm a writer, and I'm a teacher.
That is brilliant. And I think somewhere all these fields are interlinked in a way. You know, one
Yes.
thing can lead to another, and one thing can incorporate everything in itself as well. Filmmaking. What got you interested into filmmaking and writing? How did that start?
Yeah. So when I was, I've always, when I was growing up, I was a big reader, and so of course, most readers at some point also fancy being writers. So as a
Yes.
child, also I used to scribble very derivative kind of stories from what I was reading and all of that. But that desire to do some kind of creative work, to do something that allows for expression, I think that kind of was very strong even as when I was a child. And so when I was in college, I studied history, and I was a fairly good student, and I mean one of the options was for me to continue in academia. But I wanted to do, like, I wanted to explore this other thing, like I didn't know what that thing was. So when I was like in my kind of late teens and early 20s, the thing was, journalism was one of the things, options, and mass communication came at that time. It was a new thing, and the Jamia Mass Communication Center had been set up maybe like 5 6 years before I got there or something. I think I'm the eighth batch from MCRC. So at that time, I happened to know someone who was studying there, and she told me, come and see the stuff that we do and all that. And I went, and then I thought, okay, this is good because it gives me, like, I can explore many things. So the mass communication program was designed to teach you many things. It was not really about print journalism, but there was radio, there was video, there was photography, there was also what they used to call traditional entertainment, which we used to do a street play. There was also to develop our, skills at visual language. We used to do something with graphics, so we were also working with our hands. So it seemed really exciting to me that, it would help me make up my mind. And I'm really glad I did, because that's really what it did. The 2 years that I spent there, I kind of figured out what is it that I like to do, what is it that I'm good at. And I think I was really fortunate because it opened up the world for me in really fantastic ways. My peer group, the people I went to MCRC with for my MA, it was such a diverse group. It was people come from very different backgrounds, but some of them were extremely well read and had experiences that I hadn't had. So the education was not just about the skills that I was learning, but a way of looking at the world. And yeah, it just like kind of clarified for me that I want to be able to tell stories in different forms, and which is why I think that over the course of my career, I've done. It's not like I have a specialization in just this or that.
You know what? I Before we go and deep dive into your latest book, there is something that I found really interesting about your bio, and I really want to understand where it comes from. So it goes, I'm a documentary filmmaker, writer, and teacher based in Delhi, New Delhi, with a special interest in media for and about children. You explain that.
Yeah.
Now comes a great thing. My work uses the lens of childhood, identity, and education to reflect the experiences of growing up in India. Before I ask you to explain, I want to tell the viewers and the listeners that your book, the latest book, which is this, Roop and the Rivercrossing, it is set during partition, India's partition, and it is about a little girl, Roop, and this entire narration of the book is through her perspective, is through her lens. So it's like understanding and looking at partition, not in its entirety, that's impossible. But if there was a child during the partition, what did he or she saw? Or what was there? That is what you have captured in a book. This is the first time I have read a children's book which actually captured a very sensitive topic like partition from the eyes and lens of a girl child. And when I read this thing that my work uses the lens of childhood, identity, and education to reflect the experiences of growing up in India, I realized there is something deeper in your philosophy. So I want to explore this thing, Samina. This is something very new. You don't often get to hear people and creators who are doing this thing uses the lens of childhood. This is a very powerful thing.
Well, it's been an organic growth. It's not like something I set out to do and I was completely clear and I just set out with that frame. It has evolved over a period of time, thanks to the kind of work that I've had the privilege of doing, actually. To me, the voice of the child, and now when I say this, it sounds like, so well thought out and all that. I think so, at least. But it's something that has kind of like come through a process, like I know now that in my work the focus is on the voice of the child and making place for the voice of the child. And I'm not very unique or alone in this. There are many people who have done a lot of work. Childhood studies is like a discipline, and people have there's a lot of research that I have learned from in being able to clarify my own thinking. So I think for me, what is important is what I kind of referred to earlier as well, that like my filmmaking work takes me to different places, and then I meet different kinds of children. So the way we think of the conventional way of looking at childhood is there's childhood and there's adulthood, and they're like separate. But actually, the reality is that it is not like that. In certain privileged households, perhaps it's possible to have this very safe, secure, cocooned world in which the child is protected from everything. But even there, there are challenges. We know that given, what is going on with mental health in privileged homes. Um, we know, I mean, and there are, apart from that, just like everyday kinds of things, like, loss, death in the family, children get affected by that, right? So I don't think that, this idea of childhood being this space where we have to just protect the child, and it's all about like just play and butterflies and flowers and sunshine. Yes, we must all work towards that, and we must protect children, but we must protect all children. And I feel that, for me, that is the thing that, there is a quote by James Baldwin, which I like to use quite often if I can. So, and he says, the children are always ours, every one of them. And I think if it goes on, I'm paraphrasing, that he goes on to say that if we are unable to see that, then that is actually the biggest loss of humanity, no? That if we are not able to see that the children are always ours, every single one of them. And for me, that I think has been the thing that I started with in a muddled kind of way. And it has, over the period of my, like these 20, 30 years that I've been working, has been clarified that the need to be able to see the world also from the experience, the lived experience of children, and of different kinds of children. Because, the child is a vulnerable category, because always power is with the adult in many ways. But when we grow up, it is certain children who will continue to be in positions of, vulnerability. And those are children who are from certain backgrounds in terms of class, caste, gender, race, so many things. They will always remain in sort of more submissive positions, there is no equalizing that, right? So that idea of being able to see the world from the lived experiences of the diversity of children that exist in the world, for me, that's a really important thing. And I hope that my work contributes to that conversation, to make place for the voice of the child from all of these things. There are many challenges that come with it, because I'm not from those backgrounds. So that whole question of, how do you write about somebody who's not like you? Do you end up, looking down, patronizing, particularly because they are children and you're an adult? So there are things that, these are challenges, and, we have to think about that, and the how of what we are presenting. But that's really the crux of it.
So, when the kind of books that you are writing and you are trying to make sense of our mad world from the lens of a child, I think that is a very great way of letting adults know that children also have a view of the world.
Yes.
They are also impacted. You cannot
Not
protect
just
them.
that, from the child's lived experience, actually, the adult can learn something.
Absolutely.
That, I think, it's not that we are doing this because the child should find themselves in the lived, in, the representations. Of course, children should find themselves in the books. That is important. But I think the point I would like to emphasize is that by making place for children's lived experiences, by listening to children, there's something that we can learn. We learn something about ourselves. We learn something about the way the world functions. We can see things that maybe don't happen to us, and we see it from the perspective of the child, and we see what it means to be someone without power, and how the world actually functions, and how it imposes itself on you. So I think that is important, that we are listening, not because it's just we want to be good to children, but we are listening because it's good for all of us.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. So, we'll now deep dive into your book. For our listeners and viewers, Roop and the Rivercrossing, it's an amazing. Samina, so this is written by you.
Yes.
And this was the last question, but I'm going to ask you. It is illustrated by Shivam Chaudhary.
Yes.
Shivam Chaudhary is a child, right? I mean, what's his age?
He's not a child.
I mean, but
He's
yeah,
an artist.
yeah, he's young. He's fairly
He's-
young, right?
Yes. He's a young artist,
Yeah.
much younger than me,
Yeah.
but he has done an absolutely fantastic
Yeah,
job.
because it was written, it was mentioned is a sorry, because you have mentioned is a curious kid who
Yes,
loves
his
to play,
bio is.
yeah, who loves to play and break rules. He cherishes the little joys of life, like looking up at the sky to find funny shapes in the cloud, and it goes
Yeah.
on. So I was very curious. I was first of all fascinated. I'm like, what?
So I think that Shivam's bio is a great way for us to remember that we are carrying the child that we were always, all through our life in us. And Shivam acknowledges and makes place for that child,
Yeah,
in the way. And you can see that in his work, the way that there's a kind of freeness with which he's done it. Which has is about being able to express without being bound by ideas of, it's like when children are told color within the lines, and if
yeah,
you go outside the line,
absolutely,
uh,
absolutely.
Shivam is not bound by that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's really thinking freely.
I think that is a logical way only. I think if that does not happen, new breakthroughs do not happen in any vertical. In any vertical, I think for in the way I think now, it's logical that if you do not break the boundaries, you're not gonna invent something new in any vertical. Be it technology, be it sports, be it lifestyle, be it medicine, be it art, literature, everything, right? Samira, my question related to Roop and the river crossing is this. It's a so Roop and the River Crossing, although is a small book, is a deeply impactful and a heartbreaking. It's not just a heartbreaking story, but it's a very heartwarming story. You know, it really has a great connection. And I'm not going to go into the details of what is there. What makes it even more heart-rending is that it is inspired by true events that happened in the course of partition. What made you pick up the topic of partition as a subject? Because this is a it is about Roop, who's a girl child, whose family is in a times wherein the partition is happening and they are actually transitioning in the partition. So a child and partition, two things which I never thought could be combined in a book for written for children. So what made you pick up this specific subject?
So the credit for that actually has to go to my editor, Simran Kaur, at Penguin Random House. She came to me and said, Samina, would you consider writing something for children on partition? Because we don't have enough. I think there are one or two books in India, but not a lot. So I had actually not thought of it myself. But when she came to me and she said this, and I thought it would be quite a challenge. And I think I liked the idea of taking it up as a challenge. And so I said, okay, maybe maybe I can, but because I take long, I'm not only writing, I'm doing other things and all that. I don't know when I will. So she said to me, you take as much time as you want, but it's just one of the things that I really want to be able to put out because we don't have literature for children on partition. So she just left me alone then, And whenever I had between things that I was doing, it was in the back of my head. We spoke also at that time, we spoke about, that if there was a child protagonist, then what could it be about, leaving behind? And, we spoke of, like maybe there's a toy or something, and what should it be? So that's it. We left it at that. So I would periodically think about it. It was in the back of my head. When I had time, I would go back and read stuff which I'd already read on partition. There's a lot of literature for adults on partition. Um, and then I started I was doing research and I was looking for material like, are there any accounts of children? And there were some like, all the, so there's that partition archive, there are, some accounts there. So many people who were children at that time. And then I came across Uma Chakravarti's, the historian Uma Chakravarti's essay, which is specifically on people who were children, and she has done interviews with a group of them, and she had written a essay about that. And in that essay is the story of this little girl. She's younger than Roop, actually, in that the girl in the actual historical interview. She was crossing the Ravi with her family one night, and she was scared because the river was, it's August, it's monsoon time, so it was quite full and swollen. And when you read the essay, you'll see that that child remembers seeing the Pathan, who was one of they had. So this is a group of men helping people to cross over to what is going to be their new home and country, and they represent the space from which actually they are feeling threatened, right? And yet they are the ones who are helping. And she saw the tallest amongst them, and she saw him, and she said, I will go with him. And for me, that, the child making that choice, the representative, there's just that idea of the Pathan being, someone who was going to remain in the home that was being threatened. And so he, in a way, representing that threat, and yet he wasn't the one. He was the one actually helping. I really like that idea, because that is what it is, that even in the most challenging circumstances, when the worst of the human being expresses itself, there will always be some example of somebody who retains the humanity. We are seeing it today in our times with what is going on with Palestine and Israel, and how even like just this film that has won at the Oscars, it's been made by these one Palestinian, one Israeli together, and it tells you that how, like, there is always the goodness inside human beings exists even in those most challenging circumstances, and we must hold on to that, and we must hold on to those moments. So that was something, so it stayed with me, and I thought this could be something, that happens in this, like this could be what the story is leading up to. The idea of the kaleidoscope, I don't know how it came to me. So that is one thing which I was just in a talk about this book on Saturday with a group of kids, and I was like saying that I can't tell you some where ideas come from. No, ideas pop in, and there's a little mystery to it, and it's a nice actually that the mystery remains. I can't say how it came, but I know now that the idea comes, then I'm able to decode everything else. No, in hindsight, I can say to you, once the idea has come, I can say, okay, these are the reasons why I held on to that idea and why I worked with it, you know. And for me, with the kaleidoscope, it was that idea of fragmentation, because the kaleidoscope is made up of, little fragments which take on different shapes. And this is a time when the map is being redrawn, and land is being kind of like carved out, and it's taking different shapes. So I thought it could work in a way to evoke that kind of, metaphorically work to evoke that idea of, you know uh, new homes, new countries being created. And yet there's something, something, it's not such a clean break. You leave something behind, you carry something with you. So that fluidity of how shapes come and form in the kaleidoscope, it felt like something that I could hold on to and work with. And so it became about this girl and this toy that she gets, which is the kaleidoscope. But and leading up to this idea of the crossing, which is taken from something that really happened, and that also I think is something that I appreciated that, and I do appreciate that books for children, if they are able to show that it's not something that's completely concocted from our imagination, that this possibility actually exists in the world. This possibility of people being good to each other, the possibility of care is not something that is concocted in our heads and in our imagination, but also it is something that we take from the world and from the lived experiences that we have. So I liked that idea, that to be able to retain that. And, the kids may not get that right in the beginning. They may come back to it. They may not read that note, which is there at the end of the book in the first reading. Maybe they'll read it at some other time. Maybe some grown up will read it. Maybe it comes up in some conversation. I think there are many ways in which that can happen. but I wanted that also to be a part of that story, that we always have a choice. And that's what it means to be a human being. That's what it means also to be a reader, is that you are thinking. You're not just passively receiving a story, but you take that story and you think about it. So for all those reasons, then the story sort of came together. For me, it was also like I wanted, so the first half of the story, of course, it's, you see, the idea of partition is there from the beginning, but you're also seeing the everyday world of the child, and the everyday experiences. And I think that's also something that we must make place for, because sometimes, otherwise we are talking on about it's just that. But, even when a terrible thing happens, the everyday continues. Like we have been seeing with Palestine, no? Such terrible things are happening to them. And at the same time, we'll see children are also playing. There's a girl I've been following, Renard. She has been cooking. She's a young child and she's just started. That has been her way of coping with it. So we do that, no? Like what is terrible, what is heartbreaking, and at the same time, something which gives joy, which is funny, things, that's what it means to be human. All those things come together. So I wanted very much that the story should have all of those things. I don't know how successful I've been. That's for readers to tell me, but that was my attempt.
No, no, the attempt was, it's a very powerful attempt, because sometimes you need to attempt such subjects and topics. That in itself is praiseworthy. Because these attempts, as I said, I could have never even thought about a topic like that from a lens of a child, never. So, Samina, what I want to also know is that when you did decide to write on this event specifically, I was just thinking, how do you then decide what parts of partition I do not want to include, which parts or which things I do want to recreate, so that it still is a picture book for children?
So I think the first thing I'd like to say is that as a writer for children, um, because in any case, children's literature is in some ways it's a strange category, because it is written for children, but it is being written by adults, no?
Adults.
And this is been a subject of considerable debate. But as a writer, and I know many writers who feel the same way, I think that when I write, I'm not thinking of like, this is the child I'm writing for. I can only write for the child that I know. So, who is that child that I know? The child that I know is the child that I was, and the child that perhaps I still carry in me, the child that I interact with, the children that I meet, the notions that I have of children who are growing up today. So I can only write from, like, for myself in that sense, no? Like, of course, target audience and all is a thing, and it's something that, books then get categorized and marketed like that. But I think those come later. And I can only write for, like, when something feels right to me, uh, and I'm thinking of myself, from like the child that I was or the children that I know, right? So I'm trying to then to think of, like, what's it like to be like a 9 or 10 year old, and what is it like, what would it have been like to be that child at that time, in that very, very traumatic moment. And of course, we have research which has shown us that children were not protected from the worst of it, no? Children saw the worst of what happened in partition, the killings, the, if you were taking a train, how could you be protected from that? They were not protected from, like, there are accounts of the women who jumped into the wells, and children, people who were children at that time remember seeing all of that, right? So we know. And that's the other thing, to be able to remember that childhood is not always a protected site, that children are as much in the world as adults, and if the world around them is going up in flames, they are also going to experience that, right? So if they have been able to experience it, then we are, I think, we should be able to write about it for other children to be able to see that with empathy. So when we speak of trauma, of yes, there are, I think, many people are not able to speak about a traumatic incident, but we also know that repression is not the answer, right? So we cannot force people to speak about it, but we do have to engage. We have to create environments in which people are able to at some point express, because we know that by talking we are able to cope with trauma, right? Science has shown us that. So and that there are many different ways, like not everybody will follow the same timeline, and all of that. So I feel that when we are, there is this whole like thing now about children's books that talk about difficult subjects. I feel a little bit uncomfortable about this very, like, strict kind of categorization, because I think it's about life, and there is difficulty in life,
Subject
now.
is a subject.
It's, yeah,
Yeah.
and you may not have had difficulty, but there are other children who have had difficulty, right? So if those children are able to live through difficulty, then surely we can read about them, And I feel that the adults who are with children, while when you're reading books like this, the adult has to be cognizant of the fact that, so if the child wants to express agency by refusing, then I think the book should be put away. This is a question that came up very often for me, like when people would talk about Jamlo walks, and I would say that definitely it should be, one must take the cues from the child. And so, if we find that it is becoming something very difficult, put it away, come
Mm.
back. But
Mm.
you have to have a conversation, because, to be able to just protect your child to the extent that you can't talk about difficult things that have occurred to other children, I think there's something there that is just perpetuating the inequality, right? So of course we must do it with care. We must give care also to that child who is perhaps not being able to cope with that, and so that may not be the time to deal with it. But I think, as an idea, just as an idea, I don't think that there are things that we cannot talk to children about if other children have gone through them, but it is the way, the so as creating something, it's about content and form, right? So that's what I say about the content, but I think the form is in many ways more important. Like, how are we talking about it,
Yeah.
what is the way in which we are talking about it? So what is the way in which I'm writing about this? So for me, this, then, to come to a part of your question, the idea of the child, for me, that it should come from the thing, that was something I had kind of, it was like a given, right? So in the first part of the story, you see that every day, right? She goes to school, who are her friends, all of that. It's like, for me, that is as important as that final scene in which she is crossing over, right? When she's making that crossing. So it cannot be only about that crossing. I have to be able to create the life of the child. And so then those are the things that I have to think about, like what would it have been like? So what I did was, of course, I read, and I was researching all this kind of stuff, but I also spoke to somebody she was, I think, 8 or 9 years old when she came across, and I went and I had just a long conversation with her, asking her, like, what was life like before, what was school like, what are the things that you took to school to eat, what are the games you played, like all this kind of thing, to get the sense of the everyday, so that it's not only about that very traumatic moment of leaving something behind, right? So, of course, the trauma and that event is part of that story, but it's not only that. So, that was one of the things that I tried to keep in mind while writing it.
Let's say a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old or an 8-year-old does read the book.
Yeah.
What would go into her head or his head? Would reading such books ignite in them to ask more questions around the subject? Let's say they would want to go to their mothers and fathers and say, ki, Papa read this book, this is brilliant. What really happened in partition? I'm just trying to think
Yeah.
that from a
So,
perspective of an adult, I when I read, I can, I'm like, wow, could have never imagined that a child going through that. That's my point of view.
Yeah.
I want to know if a child is reading it and they've read it, what do you think? What do you want for them to do or talk about? Just want to
So I think reading
understand.
is thinking, as they say. So I would definitely want them to think and ask more questions. But when I was writing it, because I knew it's a difficult kind of like because I'm writing of a time that I myself haven't experienced, and all of those reasons, I'm trying to create a character where I also want that voice of the child to feel real. What I did do was that I shared the draft with some children. So I
Brilliant.
got responses from them before finalizing
What
it.
were the responses? These are the beta
So,
readers. So I want to know what did
yeah.
they
Yeah.
share.
So they were middle school, like most of them were like 10, 11-year-olds.
Acha.
There were maybe five, six, or four, five of them. By and large, the response was like, we never thought of like what it was must have been like for a child to go through this. And it's really great that we have a story that is from a child's perspective. So that was very heartening for me that they themselves felt that thing. Some of them said, that it might be nicer to know a little more about the girl. What is she like? So I think I did make some changes based on some of those responses, because also for me, that was a thing that I wanted it, like it's the story about what's going on the outside, but it's also the story of what's going on the inside for the girl. So I also wanted that to be strong, but getting that response, the responses from the kids, that kind of, it opens up that thing. Then okay, I have to work a little bit more on this. Yeah. So
Makes sense.
I did that.
And I think a lot of kids would also want to know about partition. They would
That's
also then have that, they would want to inquire and go deep into what really happened in partition. And Samina, I think now that we're talking and now I'm understanding more and more, I think this book and such books can do two things. A, for adults also to appreciate the perspective and orientation and the viewpoint of a child, and B, for a child to also be exposed to certain situations which are in a way uncomfortable to talk about.
Absolutely. I hope that it sort of sparks some thinking in them, and they're curious and they ask questions and they go out and they also see that. I mean, this was a historical event, but this kind of thing continues to happen in the world. No, children are having to make crossings for different reasons, different contexts. It may not be happening here, but it happens elsewhere. It's happening as we speak. It is continuing to happen in other parts of the world. So to be able to see also that those similarities, that context may change, but some of these things, because in the end these are it's about power, no, and we begin to understand power. It's a cumulative understanding, no, when we begin to understand powers from the day we are born, actually. But this is really, it's a manifestation of power. Somebody is taking political decisions and it impacts the life of ordinary people.
Absolutely.
And often those decisions don't always, although they try to, they pretend to, but they don't always take those ordinary people's lives into account in that decision making process, for whatever reason. Like, I mean, in this book we know, the note talks about it, but it is like Nehru said in his broadcast that it was something that with a heavy heart we have accepted it, right? So maybe there was attempts made to not do that, but the fact of the matter is that people got affected. Like the line was drawn and people didn't know. Just at the other day, at the talk, Uma was speaking about it as a historian, and she said that the line was drawn, but people, it was done by August 15th. The independence is announced for India, but actually, what the border is, it is the information is shared later. So for like, you think you're free, and then after a month you realize, oh, actually I cannot continue to live here if I want to be in India. So that kind of thing affects the lives of ordinary people. It is an exercise of power, you know and that it continues to happen. And for me, I mean, of course, children will not uh, ask maybe these questions about power in this way that we are talking about it. But children do understand power and the exercise of power. And somewhere I hope that this becomes something that stays and it sparks thinking in a way that they are able to see how it happens, it continues to happen in other things. You see something in the news, you see a news video clip from elsewhere in the world, and you make a connection and you think this child is also like Roop.
Samina, now I want to ask about the process of collaborating with an artist, as we were discussing on phone that day. As a writer, when you're collaborating with an illustrator, what is there something which is in your mind ki, yes, this is the kind of an illustration or art that I would want? Or is it completely dependent on the illustrator, on how he or she can create? I really want to understand how the collaboration between a writer and an illustrator happens. You can give your example. How did it happen, particularly for this book? Do you get to see the illustration? Do you approve? Does it depends upon your approval? Does it depends upon the publisher's approval? I also want to understand the business end of it. So please give some insights on how does this thing happen actually.
So it was a very it was a collaborative process in the sense that we would meet, but the art is all Shivam, right? So I mean, I want to make this distinction that it's not collaborative in the way that I have influenced the art in any way. It's collaborative in that he was open to receiving feedback, and uh, we would there are certain things that we would discuss together, and certain things will change, details will change, but the art is all his. So that it's very important to say that that it's not collaborative, that as if like the art is also mine. It's not. The art is him. As a writer, for me, what is really wonderful is when I write something and the artist makes it theirs. They find their own way to express, and that's what I feel Shivam has done with this. um, so the way that so Shivam was brought in, Penguin actually is the one that sort of brought him in. I mean, they did we sort of they sent me the work of like maybe 2 3 artists, and I liked all of them. They had different styles, different approaches, and I saw other work of theirs. I liked them all, and I liked Shivam's. I liked that he works with, like, he uses a kind of mix of media. There's watercolor and crayon and different things like that. So I liked that very much in his work. I remember I'd like the others as well. And then it finally came down to away timelines and availability and all that. So all that Penguin handled, and then they brought on Shivam. And we began by having like a meeting together, and we met periodically over the course of the book. So and one important contribution also, like I said, Simran is the one, my editor, who started it all off by asking me to write. But one other very important contributor to the book is the art director, who is from, and who actually Summer, I mean, his name is Summer. In Summer was very like the work, I think, comes together, like it gets a shape because of his contribution. So we began by thinking about, like, how should the characters look, and Shivam started drawing representations of Roop, the Pathan, the mother, like how should they all look. We had many conversations, like, clothes, what should they be wearing? And I remember he's so young that he hadn't seen many things which I just take for granted. So I told him, you have to see Garam Hawa, you have to see Tamas, and he went and he did all that. So to be able to see how he should dress them, talking about just things like that, कि उसके बाल कैसे होंगे, all that sort of thing. Classroom कैसा होगा. So, doing all that in a kind of collaborative way. So that was collaborative, but the art is all his, right? And then between him and Summer, they figured out the kind of, because it's a like, how should each page, each spread be? What part of the story? How do you break up the story? what is the kind of, like you do storyboarding for animation films and all,
Yeah, yeah,
like that, how do you break up the story, the pagination of it, and so what scenes are actually
yeah.
being illustrated, so that was something that they did together, and Samar, I think, played a very important role in that, to be able to, so it's really, creating a book, a picture book particularly, it's a collaborative process in that way, that everybody's role and what work that they do on the book is integral to the final thing. So I wrote the story, but it's not just my book.
Yeah.
It's like each of these things that go into creating the final thing. And so we met regularly over the period of, the production and all that, till the end, that talking about how it should be. Sometimes saying, Roop is looking too young or Roop is looking too old. So you would change the expression, things like that. Yeah.
No, that's brilliant. I was always fascinated with this, approach of writers collaborating with artists, and it's really fascinating because you have two individual people with different backgrounds and different experiences and different art forms and styles, and when they combine together to create something beautiful. And I really need your help in understanding. You have been writing and creating children's book for many years now. Why is it important? Okay, this question can be centered around today's day and age, but I want very, very general. Why is it important for children to read? Why should they even bother? There are a lot of things that they can do in the world. I see very few children reading books. Why should we read? What will it give me? Is it cognitive abilities? Is it the creativity that opens up? Because if we do understand the importance of having this habit of making a child read, maybe parents would themselves start reading so that the children can see and emulate, and maybe we can have more creators creating such books, and make it a very mature industry.
First, this idea of children are not reading. Okay. I think that idea itself is something we don't know enough, because there are, if you go into community library spaces, children who come from less privileged homes, who don't have access to screens and phones and all of the time, they are coming and accessing community libraries and reading and taking books home because they have never had that before, right? So they are reading, right? They want to know more. They want, there are, if you go to TCLP, they've got these various, they give them stars, like how many books you've read in a month and all that, and they say that kids are like really dying to get those stars, so they are trying to read more and more. So there's that happening at the same time. While you say what you're saying, I'm not saying it's not a problem, and I'm not dismissing that. I'm saying we need to understand this a little bit, with more
Absolutely.
complexity, with more nuance.
Yeah.
Okay, so those
Yeah.
kids are reading. Now, the kids that we know in our middle class homes, who have access to many other things, who are leading these lives where they are so programmed and scheduled, and they're going from one class to another, and homework and school and tuition, they may not be reading as much because there isn't that much leisure time where they are free to do what they want to do, right? So that's one part of the thing that we have to allow, like, get a better understanding of what's going on, because I also am seeing that those same middle class, that from that kind of cohort, this great push to have children become published authors, the kind of self publishing that is happening, with parents wanting to show that my kid has written something, that's also going on. So why is that going on, and why are they giving enough priority to something like that, if they're not giving priority to the other thing? So the picture is very complicated, and I don't have enough data to say that this is what is it is. I just know that there are many kids who are reading. I do meet them. There are many kids who are also not reading, but they're reading other kinds of things in other kinds of ways. And I also think that we must not fetishize reading, that it is
Hmm.
not about only like, oh, I am reading like 10 books a month. and there's it's about like I want to show that I'm a voracious reader, because that's not what it's about. It's about what is that reading doing to you, what are you thinking, and is it helping you or not. So then we come to that part of your question where it says that what will it do for you,
Yeah.
that it doesn't do to a non-reader. I can only speak from my experience and of those that I know, of people who are readers, children that I've seen who are readers. Um, I think the first thing that I think is that it allows us to be with ourselves. And we need to know how to do that. In that life of that programmed child that I just spoke about, I really wonder if we are taking that away from the child. And does the child even get to know who they are? If we don't make place for the child to be with themselves, then how is the child to know who they are? They must know who they are. How will they choose things in life otherwise? Yeah, you can choose for them now because they're children and your parents, but at some point they have to choose for themselves. So it's important that children know who they are. Reading is one space which allows you to do that. There are other spaces. So I'm again saying that it is not only books that do that, but reading does allow you for that. And reading allows you to see sometimes there are things that you feel on the inside, you are not perhaps able to express them. You may encounter that situation in a character in a book, and you realize it happens to other people. I'm not strange, I'm not unusual. There are ways that I can find people who are like me. You may find answers on what to do if you feel things in books, because there's a story in which something resonates and you see how the character responds to that. You may discover new ways of being in the world. You may discover new parts of the world that you never know. And all of this enables you to see who you are. You know, that that is what reading I think did for me. Reading has done for many children, that it helps you to build that inner life. And in the end, we have to have a rich inner life. It's not only about all the outside. And that brings me to the last thing that I would like to say, which is that what is it that we consider education? If education is simply about marks that enable you to build a career, then perhaps you don't need to do this reading. But what does it say about us if we think of education as that? Because, we are experiencing like the state of the world and mental health, we know what's going on. There is a crisis in the world. And that is because we are focusing so much on the outside. And we are putting that kind of pressure of achieving things on the outside without making enough place for what we really want to be on the inside. And we don't even know who we are on the inside, right? So if education is not, if we don't think about education as a way of learning about yourself, about the world, and the place that you want to have in the world, the relationship that you want to build with the world, then I think we are failing, because that's what education should do. It should allow us to see the world, to see the many different ways in which people live in the world, and it should allow us to imagine the relationship we want to build with the world, and to imagine the kind of world that we want to build, because we know we need to fix something. The world is not okay. And it's not going to become okay if we only focus on this kind of success which focuses on the outside. I think that that is the biggest thing that reading did for me, that it allowed me to know I like this, I don't like this. This is the kind of book that I like, and that means this is who I am, you know? And I think knowing yourself is the biggest thing that education should do. So therefore, I believe reading is beautiful and important and all of that. But there's also science, and there are many studies that will tell you that Kids who read have a vocabulary which is, I don't know, 50 words more than kids who don't read and all of that. So if you want to focus on the outside, there are studies which you can access. I don't know many of those because for me, that's not as important. I feel that those things come organically, it will happen on its own. If a child reads something and it is reading is thinking and allowing that child to be curious, and you are allowing for a space in which you are willing to answer those questions, I mean, of course, it's going to show up somewhere. It may not show up in the class 8 and 10 marks straight away, but it's going to show up later. I believe that.
No, absolutely. I absolutely agree. When I started reading, and when I started reading more and more, I started with fiction, and then I went on to start reading spiritual books and philosophical books and non-fiction books. I realized what we are taught in school is nothing. That's for me was an epiphany when I came to know that what we have been taught in a school is a very strict curriculum, which is for a specific result that you get. This is not knowledge. It might be education to fulfill a certain criteria of the society. That's it. That's what was my big takeaway from that. So, Samina, now tell me what I'll give you an example. I'll give you a personal example, right? When my kid was 3, I used to make him read a lot of books. I mean, I used to read a lot to him. And he used to be really interesting. And he used to even memorize the lines and everything. And once there was a little boy, and the boy saw a star and he wanted to XYZ, XYZ. He used to. Now, suddenly, he's 4.5. He has stopped reading books. I tell him कि मैं आपको book पढ़ाऊँ, आप कौन सी book पढ़ोगे? He's like नहीं. And it's completely stopped. And it bothers me a lot that why, God damn it, maybe it's my ego that I have been reading books, I want my kid to read books. So what I want to ask you is that for parents, what part could a parent do? Let's say the parents decide, yeah, I would love my child to read. I want him to have this habit of reading. What could a parent do to instill this habit?
Well, first of all, they should read themselves. The child should see them reading, and they should see that it's a pleasurable activity. That the parent also wants to make time to be able to go back to the book. You know, I think the worst thing that we can do is that we can say you should read. It should never be that you should
Yes.
read, because
Yes.
then that becomes you've taken the joy out of it. So that's, I think, the first thing. So there should be, like, if there are exciting books, the child will read. And sometimes if you say, I don't think you should read this now, you should come to it later, and you make that book much more attractive. That's a good
Yeah.
strategy, I
Yeah.
think.
Makes
Make it
sense.
seem contraband. I mean, that is, you can't, like, nobody will do something because it's good for them. That's not what it should
Yeah.
be about.
Yeah.
It should be about the joy. And I mean, I think, like, say your own child, if they're saying no, they don't want to read. I know, like, you feel, oh, it's too young. It's too young to stop reading. Um, so I feel the thing is that you should say, ah, theek hai, to tum mat padho, but I want to read this book. And
Ah,
it should be like you are having pleasure in reading it. And then maybe also, like, say, listen, I just want to tell you, I won't read it to you, but I'll tell you that story. Sometimes maybe begin by that. And then if the kid gets interested, then say, do you want to just see this? I mean, I don't think that these can be, like, so finely devised strategies. One has to, it has to be a little bit organic. You have to respond to the kid and the situation in many ways. But I think the two fundamental things is that you should not turn it into a should, and you should maybe try to make it like contraband. you
yeah,
know
makes sense.
you cannot read now, switch off the light. The child will read then, silently, quietly, sneakily. So I think those two things are important to remember. But and that you should be reading yourself, that it should feel like, there's something pleasurable here, and I want to be part of that pleasure.
Samina, I think we have come to a point wherein we'll do the book reading part of it.
So this is Roop and the Rivercrossing, and I thought I would read. It's a picture book for children, so it's not a very long story. So I thought I would read from the beginning, but I'm not going to tell you what happens in the
Yeah,
end.
that's the way.
Okay, so I'm starting right at the beginning.
Yeah, let's go.
Red, blue, green, purple. It was as if the world had split. The pieces were held together by red, blue, green, purple. They changed in shape as Roop twirled the kaleidoscope. 1 second, circles linked together, the next second, triangles. Roop, Roop, come for lunch. The fragments of the world fell together in a colorful jumble as Roop ran downstairs from the chat. Jaggi Chacha brought Roop the best gifts every year from the Mela at Shekhupura. This year, he also brought news. News that Papaji and he were arguing about. Roop heard words like Batwara and Amritsar. A voice spilled out from the radio. Today, I am speaking to you on another historic occasion when a vital change affecting the future of India is proposed. From outside came the sound of a loudspeaker in the bazaar. Har, 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 iko kar rab. Sun Jaggi, Papaji said, pointing towards where the sound came from. Ikko. People here want to be one. No one wants trouble. Praji, if it's happening there, it will happen. This side too. It's just a matter of time. Thali split up with triangles, Thali split up with circles, chanted Roop in her head as the kaleidoscope turned. The circles turned into red and green triangles. There was a Maulvi in the bazaar at Shekhupura who had arrived from Agra on one of those trains, said Chakki Chacha. He managed to survive only by pretending he was dead. Dehshat, he called it, complete terror. Bebe grabbed the kaleidoscope from Roop's hand. Not while you eat, she said. The next day, Roop walked excitedly into school. She saw Noor and Preet in the corridor. A teacher was drawing a map on a large sheet of paper on the wall. Wait till you see what I've got, she exclaimed. But Noor and Preet kept staring at the map. Veerji told me our map is changing, Preet whispered. Noor nodded. Hindustan and Pakistan. Oof, thought Roop, this again. She walked off to class in a sulk. Later, as they chanted tables, Behenji was called urgently to Badi Behenji's office. Recite the 6 times table loudly till you know it by heart, Behenji announced before leaving. Roop could never sulk for long with her best friends. She waited till Behenji was gone and then reached into her bag. 6 threes are 18, chanted Noor and Preet. Roop thrust the kaleidoscope in front of them. 6 fours are, what is this? Roop showed them. Blackboard split up with circles, Baljit slate split up with triangles, so many Nazos waving a ruler. Narae Takbir, Allahu Akbar. The voices from outside broke in, silencing the giggling girls. It's because of Hindustan and Pakistan, Preet whispered. Yes, said Noor. I'm staying in Pakistan. Me too, said Preet. BG said this is home no matter what name they give it. Roop, you? Roop looked confused. Isn't this Hindustan? She began. But just then, Behenji hurried in. Pack your things and leave for home. School is closing early, she called out hastily. The children cheered. As they made their way past the Maidan, Roop and Preet and Noor saw several tired-looking families huddled together with their bundles. A man began to speak. We welcome our new Muhajir friends. We are sorry for what you have suffered with this Batwara, partition. Roop held the kaleidoscope to her eye. They are all breaking up, she thought. When she put it down, she noticed that there were many among the group who had bandages. The blood seeping out on the white reminded her of the red line she had seen on the map in the school corridor. Noor's older brother cycled up. What are you 3 doing here? Don't you know there's tension? You have to get home quickly. The girls ran off. It had been a week of closed doors, shuttered windows, and no school. A week of confusing bits of overheard conversations, like the fragments inside Roop's kaleidoscope. Red, blue, green, purple. For generations, we have dreamt and struggled for a free and independent united India. Muhajirs are walking to the border. A train arrived at Lahore with no one left alive in it. Mariam is refusing to leave Agra because her parents are buried there. Harpreet Chacha's family have all crossed over. The only alternative to coercion is partition. The house was silent. Bebe had put Nikka down for a nap, and even the gully outside seemed to have gone to sleep. No hawkers calling out their wares, not even the sound of a cycle bell. Roop could only play the game of splitting up the world with her new toy. She trained the kaleidoscope at the forbidding front door. One became many. India, Pakistan, partition, home. She turned the tube and the colored glass shook. Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Isai. She brought the kaleidoscope down and stared at the door. The door was a border, as if the world had split. Muhajir, trains, bandages, blood. The game was not fun anymore, Roop realized. Bebe was kneading atta in the kitchen. Roop noticed the worry lines on her forehead, in the corners of her eyes, in the way her jaws tightened. Roop had asked Bebe about the Muhajirs. Bebe had called them refugees who were unfortunate and had no choice but to leave their homes. When Roop asked, "Will we leave too, or will we stay, like Noor and Preet's families?" Bebe just told her to pray for the troubles to end. Roop lay down on her bed, holding on to the kaleidoscope. Red, blue, green, purple. Split up with triangles, split up with circles. She looked towards the shut window. Getting answers from grown-ups was never easy. Bole Sonihal, Sat Sri Akal, Allahu Akbar. Roop opened her eyes to the cries outside. The dark room felt stuffy in the August night. A light flashed across the closed windows. Then a running figure holding a torch. Another procession? She wondered. But it's still night, no? She heard words in Papaji's and Jaggi Chacha's voices from the other room. Crossing. Our turn. The roar of voices from outside grew louder. She turned and found Bebe with some bundles on the floor. Bebe has been packing in the middle of the night? The worry lines were back on Bebe's face. She thrust Roop's chappals at her. We have to leave right now. Leave? Roop had many questions. What clothes have you packed? Am I going to miss school? Should I carry my school books? There was a soft knock at the door, and Roop saw silhouetted figures. She recognized the voice. It was Noor's Abba. Were they leaving too? But Noor had said they were staying, and Preet too. Chalo, chalo, not so many bags. Leave this. We don't know how much we'll have to walk. Roop, come on. Roop felt a tightness in her chest and stomach. She looked around the darkened room trying to think. Her eye fell on the kaleidoscope lying next to her pillow. She grabbed it. The tightness in her chest and stomach softened, and she followed Bebe to the door. Noor's Abba and brother led the way with lanterns in their hands. There was no sign of Noor. Hold my hand and don't make a sound, Papaji told Roop. A truck was waiting at the entrance to their mohalla. People were coming from different gullies and climbing in. Roop heard Papaji ask about Preet's family. Biji is refusing to leave. We will hide them till the trouble dies down. Maybe then you too can return. Papaji was silent. Jaggi Chacha helped Bebe and Nikka up, and then he hoisted Roop into the truck. He saw what she was holding and smiled at her. But his eyes were not smiling. It will be fine, he said. You have your favorite toy. Roop didn't smile. She tightened her hold on the kaleidoscope. Papaji shook hands with Noor's Abba. They hugged for a long, long moment, longer than Roop had ever seen. Then Papaji climbed on, and the truck started. Noor's Abba waved, and as they drove off into the night, Roop understood. that she and Noor, she and Preet had been split up. I'm going to stop there because I hope you will read the rest of the book
Yes.
and find out what happens. What happens to Roop, what happens to the kaleidoscope.
Thank you for this brilliant reading. Again, I'm going to show the viewers Roop and the Rivercrossing. Great book for the kids. Really amazing take on a child's perspective in a situation. I request everybody that please do check it out on Amazon. I'm sure you like it. Give it to your kids and let's see what they tell you about it.
Thank you. Thank you
Samina,
for
it
that.
was, yeah, sorry you were saying something. So sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say that, yeah, it's available with all independent bookstores, and many independent bookstores are also available online. So it'd be nice if you can also buy some from there. I know Amazon opens it out to many more people,
Yeah.
but yeah, lots of independent bookstores also.
Absolutely. Great, Samina. That was really amazing. Thank you so much for giving so much time. And I think what you said, some of the pointers that you shared about reading and the industry and your picture book and a concept in philosophy really was amazing. And I really sure that by listening to this podcast, parents also understand that a perspective of a child, and they also understand about the reading ecosystem, about all that you have said, and if there are adults who can also appreciate a child's viewpoint, I think that would be the great.
Yes. That adults should also remember that we are always learning. We are learning even though we are adults.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you again, Samina, for coming on the podcast.
Thank
It
you
was
so
great
much
having
for
you.
inviting me. It was wonderful talking to you, and thank you for making place for children's books, for perspectives which are not always from the mainstream. So thank you for that.